Success comes from a sharp, clear understanding of who would value what you do the absolute most. Who is it that would just say, "Oh my gosh, that is the perfect solution for me." And you need a solution that does that, but target your message at that group. And what you'll find is if you have a really good offering and a really good message and clear story, there's spillover. The people that are adjacent that you were tempted to include in your messaging will look over at what you're offering to these people that really love what you do, and they'll say, "Yeah, that looks pretty good, and look how happy those people are that are using it and how successful those businesses are."
I'm your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about how to get more B2B leads. Want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a gateway for building an independent work life. Click on the subscription button below, and that will allow us to deliver better content to you as well as let you know when we're going live. You can also now catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform. All right, I want to introduce today's guest. Welcome, Pete Steege, founder and president of B2B Clarity. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be here.
Great to have you back. So Pete's email address is in the comments field. You can grab it there if you'd like to reach out to Pete after the session. Okay, Pete, let's start with talking a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, various activities that you are involved with.
Sure, Rick. So I work at B2B Clarity, and B2B Clarity helps CEOs of small B2B companies that don't have a marketing leader on their staff make their marketing work. And I do that in three ways. One way is an assessment. It's called a marketing blueprint. It's a 30-day process where they can get to a clarity around about what their marketing can and can't do for their business. That's often a nice place for people to start. But then I also do fractional CMO work, so I can run their marketing for them part-time. And then I'm also implementation coach for marketing. Same thing. Maybe they're not ready for somebody to come in and run their marketing, but they do need some guidance and help along the way, and I do that as well.
So just for our audience, give a little bit more clarity around the fractional versus the implementation coach. I think that might be helpful for folks to better understand that.
Sure thing. So let's start with fractional. Fractional CMO is really a chance to have a CMO on your team in your business, but it's part time. So you're time sharing my time. You get all the advantages of having an experienced, savvy marketing leader, but you don't have to pay the big bill of a full time position like that. And then in that role, I work with their managing their budget. Maybe they have a marketing person on staff. Maybe they have vendors or agencies, and I basically help them figure out how to efficiently and effectively make their marketing work. So that's the first way.
Okay.
Some people aren't ready for that yet. It's even though it's part-time, it's still a pretty big commitment, right? To bring somebody into the business. And that's where the marketing blueprint comes in. It's a 30-day process, and I follow a framework where often they really don't even know enough to know what marketing can do for their business before they make investment decisions like, should I hire a fractional CMO? Should I hire an agency? Or should I hire somebody full time? So that 30-day process is a very efficient way for them to understand all of that, and it puts them in a position of knowledge, right? So they can make those decisions much better going forward. It's also a much lower investment and commitment, right? So I'm finding that to be a really common way to start with people.
Okay.
The coaching, just to mention how that fits, if they do that blueprint with me and they don't want to hire a fractional CMO, it's a pretty efficient way to just have a couple calls with me a month to help them navigate that process going forward at a much lower kind of investment.
Okay. And then on the personal front, maybe talk a little bit about some of the hobbies. I know you have a couple of things that are kind of interesting in your background, but maybe just talk a little bit about what you do outside of work.
Sure thing. I love to work on old houses, and the thing I really love is my wife and I found an old one bedroom schoolhouse on the side of the road for sale, which we moved to some woods and spent 3 years turning it into a cabin. Um, and it was just a blast. We continued to work on it a little bit, but that was really fun. Along those lines, I'm also restoring old radios into Bluetooth speakers, which is kind of in that same theme, but on a smaller scale.
All right. So if somebody wants to buy one of, well, first of all, I should say, are you doing it for yourself in your own account, or are you actually selling them?
Doing it for myself,
Okay. All
just
right.
getting started. You never know, but I'll never have the volume that would be a business. I don't think it's a labor of love for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to say, if you're selling them, sign me up for one. So, all right. All right. Say, so you've worked at both big companies, couple of quite large ones. You've also worked at small ones. Based on your personal experiences, talk a little bit about some of the differences of those environments.
Sure, that's a great question. So B2B, I've almost always been B2B, large and small, different industries. I'd say the biggest difference is on the positive side with a large company, resources, right? There's people to help you. You have platforms, you have systems and processes, so you can. It's less manual, less labor intensive to get things done in marketing. Um, on the flip side, the larger companies, it's the standard large ships are hard to turn. From a marketing standpoint, new ideas, fresh approaches to the market are harder to get done because you have to change a lot of people's minds or get action from a lot of different people. So sometimes ideas that are really great ideas get, they die on the vine. So I'd say that's kind of a negative. One thing that's not different, which is to me really interesting, is no matter how large the company and how sophisticated the marketing organization, I found that organizations struggle with effective marketing campaigns. Just the bigger they are, the bigger their appetite and the more they bite off. In my experience, and often they struggle just as much to complete what it is that they want to accomplish.
So that taps into, I guess, my first hard hitting question here today. Say, so B2B sales are not easy. I think we're all used to seeing B2C marketing because we're bombarded with that every day. And seemingly, you put enough money behind that, you can get your message out. But B2B is harder. Talk a little bit about the difficulties in getting solid B2B sales leads.
Sure, Rick, and let's differentiate a little bit too. I'm going to talk today about B2B that's not I'll call it an impulse purchase, right? So you might buy small parts and it's B2B, but it's much more like an Amazon purchase, right? We're going to set that aside. More significant B2B purchases, it's really hard to get traction for a couple reasons. One is you're usually dealing with a buying team rather than a buyer. So people need to agree to buy something. And that just multiplies the challenge of how do you get to the people that are actually going to act on it and have them all agree, right? The other thing is the people that are buying in B2B, because it's a bigger ticket item, there's a lot of people targeting them. So there's a lot of noise and a lot of overwhelmed email boxes and phone calls. And so it's really hard to break through that noise. They have their defenses up and they're not going to just let anybody get into them. And then likewise, unlike a consumer, they have a lot of priorities. There's way too much on their plates. They have too many meetings, and they again struggle to focus on the problem that you want to talk to them about and have that conversation with them. So it's just really hard to get traction and engage.
Assuming that given those organizations are going through many of the same challenges and constraints on the process, I'm assuming that there's some pretty common mistakes that you see fairly regularly. what are some of those common mistakes that you see with B2B lead campaigns?
The most common one is what I call a silver bullet approach. And that is the idea that this magical belief that we're going to come up with this one campaign and that leads are just going to flow in. And that's really common. I was speaking with a B2B company a month ago where they were telling me that they had 4 different vendors that they worked with, one after another, each one saying, "I've got the answer for you, and let's do this." And they did the work, but the magic result, the leads didn't flow in. So that's one. The second one I'll call the flavor of the month, which is people try something and they don't see, they're not patient enough, they don't see the result within a period of time that they think it should be there. They figure, well, that's not going to work, and they do another thing. Or we've got a new product now and it's so exciting, we're going to do another thing. So they're changing faster than customers can absorb that change. So just about the time their target prospect may be ready to hear what they have to say, they've changed to a different story or a different campaign tactic. And then the last one I'd mention, Rick, is it's so common for people to talk about themselves, their company, their product first, rather than about what their product does for their client, right? So it's really selling. They're trying to get leads by selling. And the way that doesn't it doesn't work that way. The way to get leads is you start by giving, and then once you've made a connection, then you frankly you keep giving until you have a commitment and a contract and agreement with them and how you can help them.
So that you started to go where I was going to take this with my next question. Folks talking about themselves and their product, feature, function. There's no emotional connection there. And so that's something that I've always been in touch with is, hey, how are you connecting emotionally with folks? Got to, the old saying of they buy with the emotion and then they justify it with the facts. So talk a little bit about the importance of that last bullet point that you said about too much talk about themselves and their own products and not, and I'm putting a little bit of words in your mouth, but not enough emotional connection.
Totally agree, Rick. And there's a stat which I along those lines, 90% of decisions are made unconsciously, right? Emotionally. And then they need to justify they need to kind of find a way to make that happen. And I think the mistake is people think, oh, this is business. So it's not, it's rational. This isn't consumer purchase. Hey, we're all people. The people, your buyers may be buying for a business and they may have some data and some structure to follow, but at their core, they are going to make decisions just like you and I do, all the more because of what we said before about how crazy busy they are, about the bombarding messages they're getting. All the more reason, if you don't connect with them emotionally, you're not going to break through. You're just not going to.
And then the flip side of that, of common mistakes, what about getting things actually done? Is there a process or a way in which that you would recommend that folks move forward?
So working with people, there's a couple of things I would point out that really are a great place to start to have a lead. And there's different ways to do it, of course, but there is a process that I would recommend following. And the first thing is to focus very sharply. Again, this is not intuitive. It's so tempting to say, I can't narrow my target. I can't be too specific because I'm going to miss opportunities, right? I want to make sure it's inclusive and it brings in other people. That's not how it works, in my experience. Success comes from a sharp, clear understanding of who would value what you do the absolute most. Who is it that would just say, "Oh my gosh, that is the perfect solution for me." And you need a solution that does that, but target your message at that group. And what you'll find is if you have a really good offering and a really good message and clear story, there's spillover. the people that are adjacent that you were tempted to include in your messaging will look over at what you're offering to these people that really love what you do, and they'll say, yeah, that looks pretty good, and look how happy those people are that are using it and how successful those businesses are. I'm drawn to that too. um, I think of big brands, business brands like IBM as an example. I don't think many people are buying today from IBM. I mean, they used to in the PC days, but I mean, personally, IBM has a real positive um, reputation for me because of what they do for big business and the things they do there. So that's just an example how there's that halo effect that if you really sharpen your focus, you actually will get more. So that's one. The second thing is it's the silver bullet problem. The way to solve that is divide your motion, your lead generation motion into two steps. Instead of trying to do it all at once, start with awareness only. Awareness means your prospects know who you are and know what you do. So if you say that's going to be my goal for some things that I do, and that's it, that's the only thing that I'm going to care about, that gives you the ability to create some really focused and cost efficient campaigns, because you're not trying to get them to send you their email. You just want them to know who you are. Think of in B2C, think of a billboard. I mean, that's what a billboard is. You're not getting a call to action. You just want them to know who you are, right? The second motion is then, I have a problem and I want to ask you to help me solve that problem. So it's interest. It's the prospect reaching out to you and saying, I'm interested. I want to talk to you. I'm approaching you. So you need other campaign steps, other tactics, that the role of that is interest. And those things can overlap, and sometimes they might even be the same thing. But by measuring those things differently, you can make sure that you get both of those jobs done, and it helps your prospect make that journey from not knowing who you are to giving you their email address or calling you on the phone.
So a lot of gray area here, right? So no quote unquote right answer. 2 + 2 = 4. You're making some judgment calls, like you said there. We're breaking it into 2 steps, and we're trying to stage it out. So it's not as simple as, hey, I did X and Y happened. So how does one actually go through the process of choosing the right tactics?
Yeah, and there's not one right tactic for every situation, for sure, right? There's going to be a right answer for you and your business and your market and your customers, and there's going to be a different tactic that's for somebody else. You might even have a different tactic you need next year versus this year. So the way to figure out the right tactics is, before you go to tactics, first figure out what job that tactic is going to do for you, right? You need to set your metrics and the targets for your metrics. So that's where that awareness and interest split helps you. On awareness, for most people, it can be really straightforward. Awareness is successful if I can measure my awareness success if I get impressions. I don't need anything other than impressions. So what I recommend on awareness is you target impressions, and then look at your tactics. So you have a certain number of impressions you want for your target audience and where you are, etc. But then you want to look at your possible tactics and kind of rate them against three factors. One is focus. Is this a tactic that can be really targeted at a certain group of people? Second is spam risk. Is this a tactic where I'm at risk of spamming them if I do it too much? Sensitivity to that, right? And then the third is cost efficiency, cost effectiveness. You want to kind of rate the tactics you're considering against those three factors, given the impressions that you need to collect. I'll give you an example of typically a really good tactic for B2B. That's LinkedIn advertising. Very focused. You can choose titles and companies and regions, right? You can be very specific. It's an ad on LinkedIn. They're there expecting to connect, so you're at less risk of spamming them. And it's not the cheapest tactic, but it's pretty effective because you pay by click. So there's an example of how you'd use that to rate your awareness. And then interest is different. Interest, your goal is they raise their hand. So what you need to do for interest is decide for your business, what does that interest look like for your sales team or whatever you need? Is it a signing up for a demo? Is it downloading a piece of content and giving you their email? What is it that says success to you? And then, very important, for interest, you need a response plan. This is a conversation. So you need to figure out ahead of time when somebody raises their hand, and the way we decide that they're going to do that, what are we going to do? What is our whole team going to do in response that's going to move that conversation forward?
So awareness, interest, response plan. You mentioned a specific tactic or tool, that being LinkedIn. Just at a high level, and maybe you want to talk a little more about LinkedIn, or maybe you want to make some other suggestions. But what are generally some good lead generation tactics that work the best in the B2B world?
Well, for awareness, I want to mention one other one that people don't often think of. Everybody knows Google pay-per-click ads, PPC, right? Well, click is interest, right? Click is an action. You can use, if you say, I need an awareness tactic, and you let go of the need for a response, you can actually very efficiently use Google pay-per-click as pay per impression. So think of it this way, again, like a billboard on your website. If you create your ads, your pay-per-click ads with a clear image and a clear message about what your value is, and don't worry, and you have a link there, but you worry less about getting people to click on it, and it's more about just getting it in front of people on their web journey. You're getting those impressions, right? And you can do it very affordably because you're not paying as much as if it was all about getting the click through. So that's just something for people to think about as a really cost efficient tactic. Let's talk about interest for some good suggestions. As I said, that's about raising their hand. There are actually two kinds of interest. There's active interest, really, hey, here's my email, send me more information. But there's also passive interest, people that visit your website, for example, or comment on your social media. You want a different response plan for each. I think some of the most effective interest tactics for B2B are cases where you're giving them something of value. I like to think of it as, rather than thinking of this as a lead campaign to get them to buy something from you later, think of it as you're actually giving them something, you're selling them something from the very beginning of the relationship. You're giving them valuable information, for example. That's where a guide, right? A comprehensive guide to X, whatever it is your specialty is. Give them that for free. A webinar is an example of you're giving them, an opportunity to attend that seminar. A free trial, a demo, free demo consultation. Those are examples of you give to receive, right? Rather than, again, selling to them, give them something. And then what you're asking for in return as the exchange, rather than them paying you, you're asking for their email address.
And then we started this talk with a little bit of your background, some big companies, some small company. Do these various tactics matter much, whether we're talking about the business being a large one or a small one? Or do these tactics work as kind of a one size fits all?
Largely one size fits all, or different sizes of the same idea fits all. The exception is a lot of small companies don't have awareness, right? Whereas an established larger company, they've been in the market for a long time. People know who they are. The example I think of from my past is Seagate Technology. Everybody knew Seagate offered disk drives at the time, right? And that was, you didn't need to create that awareness of them as a supplier. Whereas most smaller B2B companies that I speak with, one of their biggest issues is people just don't know who they are. So I think that's one of the biggest differences. But the general mechanism here is universal. This idea of giving giving your insight and value as a way for them to know who you are, and bringing them into a relationship over time with your giving to them, is that's going to work in any scale.
Okay. And then talk a little bit about some successful examples. We talked about some of the mistakes earlier, but talk about some of the lead campaigns that you've observed or been a part of that you thought were successful and that our listening audience could learn from.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of Seagate, one thing we did when I was at Seagate was we this was back in the day. There's the blog was brand new at Seagate, and we wanted to get the conversation going online. So we used a social object. If you don't know what a social object is, that's time for another seminar. But I would look it up. Hugh McLeod is the great guy that talks about it online. But basically, it's something to talk about collectively on social. So we froze Seagate disk drive into my backyard ice rink for the winter, and just checked in through the winter to see if how it would survive the winter. And it was a fun thing. And again, B2B doesn't have to be stiff, right? So
Yeah.
we actually created a lot of buzz awareness in the market. We had some press coverage, other things. So that's an example of an awareness tactic that was very affordable and focused on a particular market. Um, Another firm I worked at, a security firm, we had to reach these security analysts who are crazy busy. Everybody's trying to reach them. Very technical, very discriminating, and we needed them to try our product. And so one thing we did is we went to a very busy trade show, and rather than say, "Hey, come and look at our demo selling," we created a speed trial, which was game. We gamified it, and essentially we gave them the ability to use our product in the booth and and we timed them, and they were competing with their peers, which played right into their motivations. They're very competitive people, and so we were able to motivate them to try our product by giving them a game of it, basically. And that we were very successful in getting views of our product at the time that way. So there's an example of an interest campaign. And then the last one I'll mention is a capital equipment firm, where we created a forum, a breakfast forum at a national event that allowed us to position ourselves. We basically leapfrogged our lower level small company position and kind of partnered with these global vendors because we had a value in bringing these people together. Um, so some of these tactics can be successful even without without actually sending them something, by just partnering with the right people, aligning with the right people.
Great. So, a reminder to our audience, we have Pete Steege here with us. Pete is talking about B2B marketing, and hit the subscribe and like button. That will allow us to connect with you in the future, as well as let you know when we're going live. Hey, Pete, anything else along these lines that maybe we haven't gotten to yet, or anything else come to mind that I didn't ask a question around?
We talked a little bit about upfront about giving versus selling, and I want to just hit on that some more. I think it's so common for businesses to try to get before they give, and it's like the golden rule kind of a situation. With what really works is if you authentically offer value to your prospects. So if you can give And this sounds touchy-feely, but it works. If you can give them what they need, and before you sell, what they need is guidance, insight, ideas, things to simplify, shortcuts, you know, understand what it is that they need in their busy, crazy, stressful lives, and draw on your experience and give them some of your value for free. I just think it's a secret weapon that people are missing the opportunity to do. It's not about you. It's not about your product. It's about your client. And the more you can help them, the more they're gonna align themselves with you and be attracted to you. That's what they will be, is attracted to you.
So, one of the questions that occasionally get to, and I'm going to throw this one at you a little bit. I find it interesting to have folks reflect on their career, things that they've learned. So, if you look back in time over your career, a lot of interesting twists and turns, big companies, small companies, et cetera. Was there a lesson that you learned along the way that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Well, that thing about giving and before receiving is one, but I will add another one, Rick. Don't try to do too much. Marketing is maybe more than most different disciplines. Marketing is not very effective. It's a dirty secret. The number of marketing campaigns that work the way people want them to work is really low. And I think the people watching will know this, right? They've experienced that, where marketing doesn't work and they're not happy with it. And I found over my career, as I said before, big companies, small companies, it's the same problem with everybody. People tend to try to do too much. So I guess the lesson for me is to do less, but do it better, do it well, and you'll save money. You'll stand out because you're doing something exceptional. And marketing's about being exceptional. So I think that's the opportunity that I learned over the years.
And then, as far as our talk today goes, if you wanted to kind of reiterate a point, or maybe it's something we didn't get to, if there was one key takeaway that you'd like the audience to remember about our discussion today, what would that be and why?
Lead generation there's not a silver bullet. There's no magic success. And think of it as two steps to be successful. Awareness first. It's all about impressions. Measure that. If you do that, you can check it off. And then interest is about raising your hand, your customers raising their hand, and be ready to respond when they do.
Okay. Appreciate that very much. Pete, for those of the audience out there just listening and not watching or accessing the comments field on YouTube, what is your email for folks to reach out to you at?
My email address is pete.steege, Steege, at B2B Clarity
Okay.
Marketing.com.
All right, Pete, thank you very much for joining us. This was the second time that we had you with the Club E community. I look forward to having you back again, and enjoy your cabin this season.
Rick, thank you so much. And I really look forward to coming back.
All right, thanks.